Daewon Kim opened his eyes to a green sky. That was the first sign something was wrong. The second sign was the pain in his head. The third sign was the metal collar around his neck. He sat up slowly and looked around. Trees surrounded him, but they were wrong. The bark was purple. The leaves were too big. 3 moons hung in the sky above him. This was not Earth. Daewon was a soldier, a Green Beret with the United States Army Special Forces. He had trained for 15 years to handle impossible situations. But waking up on an alien planet was not in any training manual. He checked his body. No serious injuries. His uniform was gone. Instead, he wore simple gray clothes that looked like prison gear. His weapons were gone. His gear was gone. Everything was gone except the collar. The collar was smooth and cold. He tried to pull it off, but it would not move. Small lights blinked on its surface. Daewon stopped pulling. If this was alien technology, forcing it might kill him. He stood up and studied his surroundings. The clearing was about 50 feet wide. Dense jungle pressed in from all sides. The air was thick and hot. Strange sounds came from the trees. Animal sounds, but nothing he recognized. Water. That was the first priority. Daewon had survived in jungles before, back on Earth in training and in combat. The rules were the same everywhere. Find water, find food, find shelter, stay alive. He walked to the edge of the clearing. The jungle was dark under the canopy. Vines hung like ropes. The ground was soft and muddy. He found a thick stick and tested it, strong enough to use as a weapon or walking stick. Then the voice came. It boomed from everywhere at once. The collar around his neck grew warm, and suddenly Daewon could understand the words. They were not in English, but somehow his brain translated them. "Welcome, human, to the great chase." Daewon froze. He scanned the trees but saw no one. The voice continued. "I am Commander Thelvax of the Vrex Hunting Corps. You have been selected for a great honor. You will be hunted by the finest warriors in the galaxy. If you survive 6 days, you will be released." But no prey has ever survived. Daewon's jaw tightened. Prey. They thought he was prey. "You have 3 hours before we begin." The voice said, "Use them wisely. Run far, hide well. Make this hunt worthy of our glory. The jungle is surrounded by a barrier. You cannot escape. You can only delay the inevitable." The voice laughed. It was a harsh, cruel sound. "We have hunted 300 species across 40 star systems. We have never failed. Your death will bring us honor. Try to make it entertaining." Then silence. Daewon stood still for a full minute. His mind raced. He had been kidnapped by aliens. They wanted to hunt him for sport. They thought he was just another animal to kill. They were wrong. Daewon moved quickly. 3 hours was not much time, but it was enough. He had trained for worse. He had survived worse. Those aliens might have ships and weapons and technology, but they had made one mistake. They thought he was prey. He found a stream within 20 minutes. The water was clear and cold. He drank carefully, testing it first. His stomach did not rebel, so he drank more. He filled his pockets with smooth stones from the stream bed. Primitive, but stones could be weapons. He followed the stream and found edible plants. At least they looked similar to plants, he knew. He took small samples and marked the locations in his mind. He would test them later if he survived that long. The jungle was full of life. Small creatures moved in the trees. Larger things called in the distance. Daewon studied everything. Every sound. Every movement. Every detail might save his life. He found a rocky area where the stream cut through a small canyon. Perfect. He could set traps here. He gathered vines and sharp stones. He made a snare using techniques he had learned years ago. Simple but effective. Then he made more traps. Pit traps covered with leaves. Tripwires made from vines. Sharp stakes hidden in the mud. He worked fast but carefully. Each trap was placed where a pursuer would naturally step. Daewon's hands were bleeding by the time he finished. He washed them in the stream and kept moving. He found a cave hidden behind a waterfall. Small but defensible. He memorized its location. 2 hours gone. 1 hour left. He moved to higher ground and studied the jungle layout. He identified escape routes, hiding spots, choke points where one man could fight many. His mind turned the jungle into a battlefield. This was what he had trained for. Not aliens, but the principle was the same. Asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, a small force against a larger one, intelligence against brute strength. Adaptation against superiority. The Vrex thought they were hunters. They had probably hunted creatures that ran in panic, that hid in fear, that died in terror. But Day One was not a creature. He was a soldier. And soldiers did not just run. They fought back. He thought about his training instructor, Master Sergeant Taeyang Park. Taeyang had been his best friend. They had served together for 8 years before Taeyang died, saving Day One's life in Afghanistan. Taeyang's last words had been simple. Complete the mission. This was Day One's mission now. Survive. Fight. Win. He made one final preparation. Using sharp stones, he carved a message into a large tree near the clearing where he had awakened. The message was in English, but he hoped the alien's technology could translate it. The message read, "You made a mistake. I am not prey. I am a predator, and I am coming for you." Then Day One disappeared into the jungle. The 3 hours ended. Somewhere above, in a ship he could not see, the Vrex hunters prepared to descend. They checked their weapons. They reviewed their tactics. They joked about how quickly this hunt would end. They had hunted for decades. They had killed hundreds. They were the best warriors in the Vrex Empire. They had never lost, but they had never hunted a human before. They had never hunted Daewon Kim. In the jungle below, Day One waited in the shadows. His breathing was slow and controlled. His mind was calm. His body was ready. The fear was still there, but he had learned long ago how to use fear. Fear kept you sharp. Fear kept you alive. The hunt was about to begin, but the Vrex did not know that they had already made their fatal mistake. They thought this was sport. They thought this was a game. Day One knew the truth. This was war, and in war, the side that underestimates their enemy is the side that loses. High above, the first hunter began his descent to the jungle floor. His name was Kelmore, and he had killed more prey than any other Vrex alive. He expected this human to last maybe a day. 2 days if he was lucky. Kelmore would be dead in less than 20 hours. But he did not know that yet. None of them did. They were still confident, still certain of victory, still thinking of this as a glorious hunt. They would learn, but by then it would be too late. The great chase had begun, and it would end in a way no one expected. Kelmore landed in the clearing where the human had awakened. His armor was black and silver. His weapon hummed with power. He looked at the message carved into the tree and laughed. "Predator," he said to his fellow hunters through his communicator. "The human thinks it is a predator. How amusing." 4 other Vrex had landed at different points around the jungle. They were spread out in a wide circle, slowly closing in. This was standard hunting procedure. Drive the prey toward the center. Give it nowhere to run. Commander Thelvax coordinated from the ship above. "Remember, this is sport. Make it last. Show the human what real hunters can do." Kelmore studied the ground. The human had moved toward the stream. Smart. All prey needed water. He followed the trail easily. Broken branches. Disturbed mud. Footprints. The human was not even trying to hide its tracks. "Too easy," Kelmore muttered. He had hunted creatures that could turn invisible, that could burrow underground, that could fly. A human was just a soft, weak mammal. No claws, no armor, no special abilities. This would be boring. He reached the stream after an hour. The trail continued along the water. Kelmore followed it upstream. His armor sensors detected no immediate threats. His weapon was ready. He moved with confidence. That confidence would kill him. Daewon watched from his hiding spot 30 feet up in a massive tree. He had climbed it hours ago and waited perfectly still. Below, the alien hunter walked directly into the kill zone. The alien was big, maybe 7 feet tall. Its armor looked advanced. The weapon in its hands glowed with energy. But it walked like someone who had never been in real danger. Its head moved left and right, but it never looked up. Amateur mistake. Daewon had placed his trap in the rocky canyon area. The alien was heading right for it. Daewon waited. Patience was a weapon too. Kelmore entered the canyon. The walls were steep on both sides. The stream ran through the middle. Perfect place for prey to travel. Hard to climb out. Easy to follow. Kelmore did not notice the vines stretched across the path at ankle height. He did not see the carefully arranged rocks above. He did not realize that the disturbed earth ahead was not from running feet, but from something buried beneath. He stepped forward. The tripwire snapped. Rocks fell from above. Kelmore raised his arm to shield himself, annoyed but not worried. His armor could handle falling rocks. Then the ground collapsed under him. Day one had spent 2 hours digging the pit and covering it with branches and dirt. At the bottom, he had placed sharpened stakes cut from the hardest wood he could find. They would not pierce metal, but he had observed the alien's armor carefully. There were gaps, at the joints, under the arms, at the neck. Kelmore fell 8 feet onto the stakes. One pierced through the gap in his leg armor. Another caught him under the arm. The pain was immediate and shocking. He screamed. Day one dropped from the tree and approached the pit carefully. The alien was still alive, struggling to pull himself off the stakes. Its weapon had fallen to the side. Day one picked up the weapon. It was heavy but balanced. There was a trigger mechanism. Simple enough. Kelmore looked up at him. Blood leaked from his wounds. His armor was cracked. For the first time in 50 hunts, he felt fear. "You are prey," Kelmore gasped. "Prey does not set traps. Prey runs. I am not prey," Day one said calmly. The collar translated his words. "I am a soldier, and you just lost your first war." He aimed the alien weapon and pulled the trigger. Energy flashed. Kelmore stopped moving. Day one climbed into the pit and took everything useful. The armor was too big, but the weapon was good. There was a small device on the alien's belt that looked like a communicator. Day one took it. Knowledge was power. He climbed out of the pit and moved quickly. The other hunters would know something was wrong soon. He needed to be far away when they came to investigate. 20 minutes later, the communicator crackled to life. "Kelmore, report," Commander Thelvax's voice demanded. "Your vital signs show critical damage." "What happened?" Day one pressed the button on the communicator. "Kelmore is dead. I killed him." Silence. Then angry voices erupted from multiple speakers. The other hunters were shouting, demanding answers, threatening revenge. Day one waited for them to quiet down. Then he spoke again. "You wanted to hunt me for sport. You thought I would run and hide. You were wrong. I am Staff Sergeant Day one Kim, United States Army Special Forces. I have fought in wars you cannot imagine. I have survived things that would break you. And now I am going to teach you something." "What is that, human?" Thelvax's voice was cold with rage. "I am going to teach you what happens when you underestimate your enemy. I am going to teach you fear. And I am going to kill every single one of you." "Impossible," Thelvax said. "You are one. We are many. You have primitive weapons. We have technology beyond your understanding. You will die screaming." "Maybe," Day one admitted. "But I will take you all with me. Ask Kelmore how the hunt is going." "Oh wait, you cannot. Because I killed him with a pit and some sticks." He dropped the communicator and crushed it under his heel. The next hunter to die was named Sivra. She was younger than Kelmore, but just as arrogant. She tracked Day one to a cave system and entered without caution. Inside the caves, it was dark. Sivra activated her helmet lights. They illuminated the stone walls and created dancing shadows. She moved deeper, following signs of the humans' passage. What she did not know was that humans had evolved to see in low light better than most species. What she did not know was that Day one had spent the last 6 hours preparing the caves. What she did not know was that her lights made her a perfect target. Day one struck from the darkness. He had wrapped cloth around the alien weapon to dim its glow. He fired once, hitting Sivra in the leg. She fell, then came the hard part. Day one had learned from his combat experience that finishing a wounded enemy quickly was sometimes necessary. But he also knew the value of information. He asked Sivra questions. How many hunters were left? What were their capabilities? What was their plan? At first she refused to answer. But pain and fear are universal languages. She told him everything. 3 hunters remained. Commander Thelvax, Grondal, and Zevri. They were regrouping. They were calling for reinforcements. They were no longer treating this as sport. "You have started a war you cannot win," Sivra whispered. "I have been in wars before," Day one replied. "I am still here." "Can you say the same?" He took her weapons and equipment. Then he left her in the cave. She would not survive long without help, and her friends were too scared to come looking yet. Day one emerged from the caves as the alien sun set. 2 hunters dead, 3 remaining. The odds were improving, but he knew this was just the beginning. The Vrex would adapt. They would change tactics. They would come at him with everything they had. Good. That meant they were taking him seriously now. That meant they understood they were not on a hunt anymore. They were in a fight for survival, and Day-Wan was just getting started. He looked up at the sky where the wreck ship orbited. Somewhere up there, Commander Thelvax was probably furious, probably planning revenge, probably bringing in more warriors. Let them come. Day-Wan had fought against worse odds. In Afghanistan, he and his team had held off 50 enemy fighters with nothing but rifles and determination. In training, he had survived scenarios designed to be impossible. This was just another impossible scenario. And Day-Wan had made a career out of doing the impossible. He disappeared into the jungle once more. Behind him, Sivra's communicator blinked weakly in the darkness of the cave. Her vital signs grew weaker. By morning, she would be dead. The great chase was no longer a hunt. It had become something else entirely. It had become a war. And in this war, the hunted had become the hunter. Commander Thelvax watched from his ship and felt something he had not felt in decades. Doubt. This human was different. This human did not behave like prey. This human fought like a warrior. But the Vreks were the greatest warriors in the galaxy. They would not be defeated by one primitive creature. They would adapt. They would overwhelm. They would win. At least that is what Thelvax told himself. Deep down, a small voice whispered something different. Deep down, he wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. They had. 3 weeks passed on the jungle planet. Day-Wan had transformed from hunted prey into something else entirely. The jungle that was supposed to be his prison had become his fortress. Every tree, every rock, every stream was part of his defensive network. He had learned much in those weeks. The alien weapons were powerful but needed regular charging. The armor the Vreks wore was strong but had weak points. Their technology made them confident, but that confidence made them predictable. Day-Wan had set up 3 camps in different parts of the jungle. He moved between them randomly so no pattern could be tracked. Each camp had supplies taken from dead hunters. Each camp had escape routes and traps protecting the approaches. He had also learned about his enemy. By studying the equipment and listening to their communications before destroying them, he pieced together information. The Vreks were an empire. They conquered worlds and enslaved species. They had been doing this for hundreds of years. No one had ever successfully fought back. Until now. Commander Thelvax had called in 3 more hunters after Sivra died. They arrived with heavy weapons and advanced tracking systems. They were veterans of military campaigns, not just hunting expeditions. This was meant to be the end of the humans' resistance. It did not go as planned. The first of the new hunters was named Victal. He was a specialist in tracking and had never lost a target. He arrived confident and died confused. Day-Wan had learned to hide his heat signature by covering himself in mud and cold stream water. He had learned to move without disturbing plants by following animal trails. He had learned to be invisible. Victal found this out when Day-Wan shot him from a tree using one of the alien energy rifles. The hunter never even saw where the shot came from. The second new hunter, Zolmez, tried a different approach. He used flying drones to search the jungle from above. It was a smart tactic. The drones covered large areas quickly and transmitted data back to him. But Day-Wan had fought enemies with drones before. Back on Earth, terrorist groups had used cheap drones for surveillance and attacks. The American military had developed countermeasures. Day-Wan adapted those lessons. He captured one of the drones by throwing a net made from vines. He studied it carefully. Then he destroyed it and used the parts to create false heat signatures that confused the other drones. While Zolmez followed false trails, Day-Wan circled around and ambushed him from behind. The third new hunter, Rekna, was the smartest. She did not hunt Day-Wan. She fortified a position and waited for him to come to her. She set up a defended camp with clear sight lines and automated weapons. She broadcasted messages challenging Day-Wan to face her. Day-Wan ignored her completely. He had learned in Afghanistan that sometimes the best response to an enemy position is to ignore it. If they are defending, they are not attacking. Time was on his side. After a week of sitting in her fortified camp, Rekna grew frustrated. She ventured out to find Day-Wan herself. That was her mistake. The moment she left her defenses, she was vulnerable. Day-Wan had been watching the camp from a distance. He saw her leave. He followed. She never made it back to her camp. Now only 3 Vreks remained: Commander Thelvax, Grandal, and Zevri. They were the original hunters, the ones who had been here since the beginning. They had watched their reinforcements die one by one. They had seen their superior technology fail against primitive tactics. Thelvax made a decision. He called for more help, but this time not just hunters. He called for a military unit. A squad of Rex soldiers trained for war, not sport, but help would take time to arrive. And time meant more opportunities for the human to strike. Day One knew he was winning the war of attrition, but he also knew it could not last forever. Eventually, the Vrex would bring enough forces that even his best tactics would not work. He needed to change the situation. He needed an advantage. He found it in the ancient ruins. While exploring a remote part of the jungle, Day One discovered structures half buried in the earth. They were old, covered in vines and vegetation. The walls were carved with strange symbols and images. The images showed creatures that looked almost human fighting against Vrex warriors. This was not the first time the Vrex had used this planet for hunting. Day One explored the ruins carefully. Most of the structures were collapsed or flooded, but in the deepest chamber he found something incredible, a cache of weapons and equipment, sealed in containers that had survived for centuries. The weapons were not Vrex technology. They were from whatever species had built these ruins, a species that had fought the Vrex, a species that the Vrex had eventually exterminated. Day One activated one of the weapons. It hummed to life, energy coursing through its mechanisms. The design was different from Vrex weapons, but the principle was the same. Point and shoot. The power output reading showed it was fully charged despite the centuries of storage. He found armor too. It fit better than the Vrex equipment because the builders had been closer to human size. The armor was lighter but seemed just as strong. There were also tools, medical supplies, and communication devices. Day One spent 2 days in the ruins, learning everything he could. He studied the carvings. They told a story. The builders had been a peaceful species. The Vrex had come to their world and declared it a hunting preserve. The builders had fought back but were eventually overwhelmed by Vrex numbers and technology. Their last survivors had built this cache, hoping someone would find it. Hoping someone would continue the fight. Day One stood in the ancient armory and made a promise to the ghosts of the extinct species. He would continue their fight. He would make the Vrex pay for their arrogance. He would show the galaxy that the Vrex were not invincible. Armed with better weapons and renewed purpose, Day One became even more dangerous. He struck at the Vrex with new ferocity. He destroyed their supply caches. He disabled their communication relays. He made every day a battle for survival. Sevri, the Vrex tracker, became obsessed with killing Day One. She studied his patterns. She anticipated his moves. She set traps of her own. For a while, it became a deadly game of strategy between two skilled warriors. But Sevri made one critical error. She assumed Day One would continue using the same tactics. She did not know about the ruins. She did not know he had upgraded his equipment. When she finally cornered him in a valley she thought was a trap, she discovered too late that she was the one who had been trapped. Day One had rigged the entire valley with explosives made from Vrex equipment, combined with the ancient weapons he had found. When Sevri entered the valley with her squad of battle drones, he triggered the trap remotely. The explosion was massive. The drones were destroyed instantly. Sevri survived the initial blast but was badly wounded. She tried to crawl to safety, but Day One was already there. "You were good," he told her honestly. "Better than the others. But you made the same mistake they all did. You thought I was prey. What are you?" She whispered through her pain. "I am a soldier," Day One said. "I am what happens when you take someone trained to fight wars and give them a reason to survive. I am what happens when you underestimate humanity." She died looking confused, as if she still could not understand how a primitive creature had defeated her. Now only 2 Vrex remained, Thelvax and Grondel, the commander and his last loyal warrior. They retreated to their original landing site and fortified it heavily. They had automated defenses, shields, and heavy weapons. They were done hunting. Now they were just trying to survive. Day One could have attacked them. With his new weapons, he might even have succeeded. But he chose a different strategy. He waited. He let them sit in their fortress, afraid to come out. He let them call for help and wait for reinforcements that seemed to take forever to arrive. He let them feel fear. Every night, Day One moved closer to their camp. He let them see him on their sensors. He let them know he was coming. He did not attack. He just waited and watched. Psychological warfare. Inside their camp, Thelvax and Grondal argued. Grondal wanted to call for an emergency evacuation. Thelvax refused. To leave would be to admit defeat, to admit that one human had beaten the finest hunters in the Vrex Empire. So they waited. And outside in the darkness, Daewon waited too, patient, ready, knowing that time was on his side, knowing that eventually they would have to come out, knowing that when they did he would be ready. The great chase had become a siege, and Daewon had learned in military history that sieges were won by the side with more patience. He could wait as long as necessary. After all, he had nowhere else to be. The reinforcements arrived on the 43rd day. A Vrex military transport ship descended through the atmosphere and landed near the fortified camp. 30 soldiers emerged, armed with the latest weapons and military-grade armor. This was not a hunting party. This was an army. Commander Thelvax watched them deploy and felt relief for the first time in weeks. Finally, enough force to crush one human. Finally, an end to this nightmare. The commander of the military unit was named Tokvar. He was a decorated officer with experience in planetary invasions and combat operations. He listened to Thelvax's report with a mixture of disbelief and anger. "You are telling me that one primitive human has killed 8 Vrex hunters?" Tokvar demanded. "The human is not primitive," Thelvax replied quietly. "That was our mistake. He is a trained warrior from a species we did not understand. All species fall before Vrex might," Tokvar declared. "We will find this human and end this embarrassment within 3 days." Daewon watched the new arrivals from a hilltop 2 miles away. He had expected reinforcements eventually. 30 soldiers was more than he had hoped for, but less than he had feared. More importantly, they had just given him valuable intelligence. The transport ship was still on the ground. They planned to use it for extraction after they killed him. That meant the ship was a target. If he could disable or destroy it, they would be trapped here like he was. That would change everything. But first he needed to see what these new soldiers could do. The Vrex military unit began their operation at dawn. They moved in organized squads with clear communication and coordination. They used drones for reconnaissance and established forward positions before advancing. This was professional military tactics. Daewon watched their patterns for an entire day. He learned their procedures. He identified their leaders. He noted their equipment. They were disciplined and well-trained. This would not be easy. On the second night, he struck. He did not attack the main force. Instead, he targeted a 3-soldier patrol on the perimeter. He killed them quickly and quietly using the ancient weapons, then disappeared before anyone knew what happened. The bodies were not found until morning. Tokvar was furious. He increased patrols and tightened security. He established a defensive perimeter that should have been impossible to penetrate. He used every sensor and tracking device available, but Daewon did not penetrate the perimeter. Instead, he attacked from long range using one of the ancient energy weapons that had a sniper configuration. He took careful shots from extreme distance, hitting exposed soldiers before vanishing into the jungle. 3 more died this way. The Vrex soldiers began to feel what their hunters had felt. Fear. They were the superior force with better technology and greater numbers, but they were in an unknown environment against an enemy who knew every inch of terrain. They were the invaders now, and the human was defending his territory. Tokvar changed tactics. Instead of hunting Daewon, he decided to destroy the jungle itself. He ordered his soldiers to use incendiary weapons to burn sections of forest. If the human wanted to hide in the jungle, there would be no jungle to hide in. The fires burned for 2 days. Large sections of forest were reduced to ash. Smoke filled the air. Animals fled in all directions. It seemed like the plan was working. But Daewon had anticipated this. He had moved his camps to rocky areas and caves that fire could not reach. He watched the forest burn and felt rage at the destruction. These aliens did not care about the planet or its ecosystem. They only cared about their pride. That rage became motivation. On the 5th night after the military unit arrived, Daewon did something unexpected. He attacked the transport ship directly. He had spent days planning the assault. He knew the ship was guarded by automated defenses and a squad of 6 soldiers. He knew the layout from observing the soldiers coming and going. He knew it was supposed to be impossible for one person to assault a defended starship. But Daewon had learned that impossible was just another challenge to overcome. He approached from downwind, covered in mud to hide his heat signature. He moved during a rainstorm when visibility was poor. He crawled the last 200 yards inch by inch, taking over an hour to cross ground he could have run in 2 minutes. The automated defenses were sophisticated, but they were designed to detect fast-moving threats or large heat sources. A slowly crawling human covered in cold mud barely registered. The guards were watching for attacks from the jungle, not from the ground right in front of them. Daewon placed explosive charges on the ship's landing gear and engine systems. The explosives were a combination of Rex grenades and improvised devices he had built from their own equipment. He set the timers for 15 minutes and crawled away just as slowly as he had approached. The explosion destroyed the transport ship's ability to fly. The blast killed 4 of the 6 guards. The other 2 were badly wounded. Alarms sounded across the camp. Soldiers rushed to the scene. By the time they arrived, Daewon was already a mile away, moving to his next position. Tokvar stared at the burning wreckage of his transport and realized the terrible truth. They were trapped, stranded on this planet with a dangerous enemy and no way to leave. He immediately called the orbital ship and requested emergency extraction. The response took 6 hours. When it came, it was not what he wanted to hear. The orbital ship could send down a small shuttle, but it would take 3 days to arrive from their current position. Until then, they had to survive. 3 days might as well be an eternity. Daewon did not give them peace. He attacked constantly, a sniper shot here, an explosion there, traps and ambushes that appeared from nowhere. He was everywhere and nowhere. The Vrex soldiers stopped sleeping. They stopped eating properly. They just huddled in their defensive positions and waited for extraction. 15 soldiers remained alive out of the 30 who had landed. Fear had replaced confidence. They no longer talked about killing the human. They just wanted to leave. Commander Thelvax realized that his pride had caused all of this. If he had admitted defeat weeks ago, dozens of Rex warriors would still be alive. But he had been so certain that they were superior, so certain that no prey could best them. He had been wrong. Catastrophically wrong. On the 7th day, Thelvax made a decision. He would face the human directly, one warrior to another. If he won, perhaps they could salvage some honor from this disaster. If he lost, at least it would be over. He broadcasted a message on all frequencies, knowing the human was listening. Staff Sergeant Daewon Kim, I am Commander Thelvax. I challenge you to single combat. Tomorrow at dawn in the clearing where you first awakened. Bring your weapons. Bring your skills. Let us end this as warriors should. There was a long silence. Then Daewon's voice came through the communicator. I accept. But know this, Commander. I am not doing this for honor. I am doing this because I want you to understand what you have done. You kidnapped me. You hunted me for sport. You tried to kill me for entertainment. And now you are going to die for it. Thelvax expected to feel fear at those words. Instead, he felt almost relieved. At least there would be an ending. He spent the night preparing. He checked his armor and weapons. He performed the traditional Vrex warrior rituals. He wrote final messages to his family. He knew he might not survive the morning. Grondal tried to convince him not to go. This is foolish, Grondal argued. Let the human come to us. Let him face all of us together. We can still win. No, Thelvax said quietly. We already lost. The moment we underestimated him, we lost. Now I must face the consequences of my arrogance. As the alien sun rose on the 48th day, Commander Thelvax walked alone to the clearing. His armor gleamed in the early light. His weapon hummed with full power. He was ready. On the other side of the clearing, Daewon emerged from the jungle. He wore the ancient armor he had found in the ruins. He carried the advanced energy rifle and had the alien blade strapped to his side. He looked like a warrior from another age, carrying technology from multiple civilizations. The two combatants faced each other across the clearing. One was a commander of a galactic empire. The other was a sergeant from a planet the empire did not even know existed. Both were warriors. Both were killers. Both knew only one would leave this clearing alive. Before we begin, Thelvax said, tell me, how did one human defeat so many Vrex? Daewon considered the question. Then he answered honestly, you thought I was prey, but I was never prey. I was a soldier caught in a situation not of my choosing. You gave me a reason to fight and the tools to fight with. Everything else was just training and determination. And what will you do if you win? Thelvax asked. I will send a message to your empire, Day One replied. I will tell them what happened here. I will tell them that humanity exists and that we do not bow to anyone. And I will warn them to never come to Earth looking for sport. Thelvax activated his weapon. Then let us see if you survive to deliver that message. They charged at each other as the sun rose higher, and the final battle began. The battle between Day One and Thelvax lasted 17 minutes. To both warriors it felt like hours. Thelvax struck first with his energy weapon, but Day One had already moved. The blast scorched the ground where he had been standing. Day One returned fire, his shots precise and calculated. The ancient weapon in his hands was powerful, and he had learned to use it well. The commander's armor absorbed the hits, but Day One was aiming for the joints and weak points. He had studied Vrex armor for weeks. He knew where it was vulnerable. They fought across the clearing, trading shots, encircling each other. Thelvax was strong and his technology was advanced, but Day One was faster and more adaptable. When the energy weapons ran low on charge, both warriors drew blades. The close combat was brutal. Thelvax had superior strength and reach. His blade cut through small trees and left burning scars in the ground. But Day One had trained in hand-to-hand combat his entire military career. He knew how to fight larger opponents. He knew when to attack and when to dodge. He rolled under a sweeping strike and came up inside Thelvax's guard. His blade found the gap under the commander's arm. Thelvax roared in pain and staggered back. You fight well, Thelvax admitted, breathing heavily. Better than any prey we have hunted. Perhaps better than most Vrex warriors. I told you, Day One replied, his own breathing labored. I am not prey. They clashed again. This time Thelvax fought with desperation. He knew he was losing. His armor was cracked in multiple places. His weapon arm was injured, but he was still dangerous. He feinted left and struck right, catching Day One across the shoulder. The ancient armor held, but the impact knocked Day One down. Thelvax raised his blade for a killing strike. Day One rolled and kicked hard at Thelvax's wounded leg. The commander fell. Both warriors scrambled to their feet, but Day One was faster. His blade found Thelvax's throat right at the gap between helmet and chest plate. For everyone you hunted, Day One said quietly. For every species you exterminated. For every life you took for sport, the blade went through. Commander Thelvax fell and did not rise again. Day One stood over the body, exhausted and bleeding from several wounds. He had won. Against impossible odds, he had survived and defeated the Vrex hunters. But he felt no joy in victory, only weariness. He took Thelvax's communication device and limped back toward the Vrex camp. The remaining soldiers had watched the battle from a distance. Now they saw him coming, and they saw their commander was dead. Grondal raised his weapon, but the other soldiers stopped him. Enough, one of them said. We have lost enough. This human has beaten us fairly. Let us negotiate terms. Day One reached the edge of their camp and stopped. He raised the communicator. I want to speak to whoever is in charge now. A soldier stepped forward nervously. His name was Peltok, and he was now the ranking officer after Thelvax's death. What are your terms? Peltok asked. I want two things, Day One said. First, you will teach me how to use your communication system to send a message to Earth. Second, you will leave this planet and never return. Take your dead if you wish, but leave all your equipment and weapons here. That is unacceptable, Grondal shouted. We are Vrex warriors. We do not surrender to prey. Then you will die like your commander, Day One replied calmly. I have fought your best and killed them. I have survived your technology and your tactics. I can kill all of you if I must, or you can accept my terms and live. Choose now. Peltok looked at the other soldiers. He saw fear in their eyes. He saw doubt. They had come here as confident conquerors and been reduced to frightened survivors by one human. Their pride was already broken. We accept your terms, Peltok said. It took 3 days to set up the communication system. Day One watched carefully as they built a transmitter capable of reaching Earth. He learned the basics of their technology, enough to send a simple message. On the 3rd day, the evacuation shuttle arrived from the orbital ship. The Vrex soldiers boarded quickly, eager to leave this cursed planet. They left behind mountains of equipment, weapons, and supplies as agreed. Grondal was the last to board. He turned to Day One before entering the shuttle. You have humiliated the Vrex Empire, Grondal said bitterly. They will not forget this. They will return with armies and destroy your entire species. Let them come, Day One replied. By the time they arrive, Earth will be ready, And if one human could defeat your hunters, imagine what a billion humans could do to your armies. The shuttle lifted off, leaving Day One alone on the planet. He stood in the ruins of the Vrex camp and activated the transmitter. He set it to broadcast on multiple frequencies, hoping someone on Earth would hear. Then he began recording his message. This is Staff Sergeant Daewon Kim, United States Army Special Forces. Serial number 549237834. If anyone on Earth receives this message, please listen carefully. He told them everything. About the Vrex Empire. About the hunting preserve. About the battles he had fought. About the technology he had captured. About the threat the Vrex posed to humanity. I do not know if I will ever return home, he concluded, but I have proven something important. Humans can survive against alien threats. We can fight. We can win. If the Vrex come to Earth, do not be afraid. Be ready. Use what I have learned. Study the equipment I have captured. And remember that they bleed and die just like any other enemy. He paused, thinking of his family, his friends, his fellow soldiers back home. To my mother and father, I am sorry I disappeared. I hope you are proud of what I did here. To my fellow soldiers, complete the mission. Always complete the mission. And to anyone listening, remember this. Humans are not prey. We are survivors. We are fighters. We are warriors. And we will not bow to anyone. He sent the message on repeat, broadcasting it into space toward Earth. He did not know if anyone would receive it. He did not know if it would reach home before the Vrex returned. But he had done everything he could. The message broadcast for 6 days before something unexpected happened. A ship emerged from hyperspace near the planet. But it was not a Vrex ship. It was a human ship. Day One stared at the sky in disbelief as the vessel descended. It was crude compared to the Vrex technology, clearly built in a hurry from whatever Earth had available. But it was flying. It was here. Somehow, impossibly, humanity had reached the stars. The ship landed near the old Vrex camp. A hatch opened and people in military uniforms emerged. Day One saw the American flag on their shoulders and felt emotions he had not allowed himself to feel for weeks. Hope, relief, joy. The commanding officer approached. He was a Navy captain named Young-Soo Han, and his eyes were wide with amazement. Sergeant Kim, he asked as if he could not believe it. Yes, sir, Day One replied. Your message reached Earth 3 weeks ago, Young-Soo explained. It caused chaos, panic, but also determination. We have known about aliens for years, but kept it secret while we prepared. Your message forced everything into the open. The world united faster than anyone thought possible. How did you get here so fast? Day One asked. We captured a Vrex scout ship years ago, Young-Soo admitted. We have been reverse engineering their technology in secret. When your message arrived, we accelerated everything. This is humanity's first faster-than-light ship. We had to launch it half-finished just to reach you before the Vrex returned. A woman stepped forward. She was a lieutenant in the Air Force named Ji-Won Lee, and she smiled at Day One. You are a hero back home, she said. You proved that humans can fight aliens and win. Every military in the world is studying your tactics. You started something, Sergeant. You started humanity's rise to the stars. Day One looked at the ship, at the soldiers, at the equipment they were unloading. Earth had responded. Humanity had adapted, just as he knew they would. The Vrex will return, he warned them. They will bring more ships, more soldiers. They will want revenge. Let them come, Young-Soo said with a grim smile. Earth is preparing. We have 1 billion soldiers training right now. We have factories building ships and weapons. We have scientists studying every piece of alien technology we can find. By the time the Vrex arrive in force, they will find humanity ready for war. Good, Day One said, because they will come. And when they do, we need to send them a message they will never forget. The extraction took 2 days. The human ship was loaded with Vrex equipment and technology. Day One showed them the ancient ruins and the weapons cache he had found. Young-Soo was amazed. There were other species that fought the Vrex, Young-Soo said thoughtfully. That means they can be beaten. That means we have allies out there if we can find them. Before they left, Day One returned to the clearing where he had first awakened. He carved a new message into the tree below his original warning to the Vrex. The message read, Humanity was here. We survived, we won, and we are coming for you. The human ship lifted off from the jungle planet and jumped to hyperspace. Day One watched through a viewport as the planet disappeared behind them. He had survived 52 days of hell. He had fought impossible odds and won. He had become humanity's first interstellar warrior. 6 months later, Day-Wan stood in a military academy on Earth's moon. Around him were 3,000 soldiers from every nation on Earth. They were the first generation of humanity's space forces. They called themselves the Terran Defense Legion. Day-Wan was their chief instructor.